big meeting. We expect 700 people to join us, and we've already got 300 people into the room, and they're piling in now. Pretty exciting for me. Just so you guys know, started 2 weeks ago today. Some dentists had some questions. I said, let me get somebody on the phone to help you guys out. Expected a dozen people. We had 70. Today, we're going to push up close to 800. So it's pretty fun. And again, these are just to bring information to you about what's going on. No sales pitches, no prices, no products. Just help you guys navigate through this interesting time that we're going through. A little bit of housekeeping today. There is a chat box you can bring up on the bottom of your screen, and you can put it up in the corner. And then the question and answer box, we're going to utilize that a lot. So as we go through the presentation, if you can start to populate your questions into the Q&A box, at the end, we're going to try and answer as many of those as we possibly can. I have Spencer Wesley here with Engage Advisors. He's going to help me moderate the chat. Spencer, go ahead and say hi in the chat if you want. We've got about 500 people in here. And then Spencer's also going to help me read off some of the questions there at the end. So I'm super excited. You know, I expected 200 or 300 people, and we've got 2 or 3 times out on this call. And I see a few of you saying hi in the chat box. It's pretty exciting for me and pretty special. Hopefully you can see my picture up there in the corner of your screen. I'm so glad you guys could all attend. So we want to use up as much time as we can. We've scheduled this for 1 hour. Jean can go as long as she wants. I'm going to leave it open. If you guys are done at 1 o'clock, you can go ahead and tune out. Or if you want to stay on for more Q&A and more questions, go ahead and stick in there. And, you know, Jean will cover as much as we possibly can. And if anyone misses this presentation, I didn't want to announce it before so you guys change, but I'm going to do it again. Jean and I are going to get together on Thursday afternoon. So if you didn't invite your staff, which I think is incredibly vital, and Jean's going to cover that as well, you can definitely invite them to come back with you to Thursday's meeting or just send them this way. So without further ado, and I thank you guys for attending. There's close to 500 people in the room now. We're expecting a few hundred more, but doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and get started. Jean, friend of mine, confidant, please help us out. And look forward to seeing your presentation. I'm going to mute my microphone and sit back and watch.
Hey, thank you. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to know that we've got a lot of participants today. I know the first thing that, you know, I had done in doing some research on this, obviously, we're all living in very difficult times. I know if you're like me, I've watched a lot of news. I've seen not too much, thank goodness, but have, you know, followed on social media, and infection prevention is on the top of everyone's mind. You know, with this COVID, you know, virus, it stands at about 800,000, you know, confirmed cases in the US. And that number is obviously going up. We know that it's mandatory when you leave your homes to wear a mask and wear gloves, and people are wearing them at the grocery stores, and we're definitely in unprecedented times. And so dental offices around the world continue to be impacted by the unprecedented disruption by COVID-19. You know, you're not used to taking this much time off. You're used to being able to maybe take a week or two to be on vacation, but nothing like what you are encountering now. So while no one can say when we're going to open, there is, you know, certainty that we are going to open. That's a fact. It looks like some states are going to be open May 1st, maybe May 15th. The ADA has taken a stand and is recommending that, you know, we'll probably be reopening mid-May. I know that within certain states, governors are saying that, you know, it has gotten to the point where that dental offices need to open to take care of patients. So yes, we've been treating patients with an emergency situation and urgent care, but as many of you have verbalized to me, those, you know, those patients need some work, and you do need to get going with that. So the goals of today is to really kind of focus on preparing you to reopen, discussing cross-contamination education and the administration's role in that within your practice. PPE, what does it look like currently and what might it look like in the future? Donning and doffing sequences and what we need to do with that. And reviewing your infection prevention protocols, and then some scripts for how to handle this process with your patients. So, you know, first and foremost, I think, you know, it is a challenging time. I'm not here to say I have all the answers, and there's really no one out there right now that does. So one of the things that I will not be addressing today is I will be touching very, very little on some tips for aerosol, but that's an area that is really, there's been no guidelines given on that. And I would be, silly to be out here saying, this is what you need to do. If you're on social media, there's been a plethora of, ideas being thrown out. You need to do this and you need to do that. And you need to do this. We don't know. The thing I believe we do know is that we will be opening. And I really find it very difficult to believe that the ADA or OSHA is going to come out with absolutely, here is the guideline that you absolutely have to follow. I think it's going to be an evolving process, and we'll go through, some of that today. So steps for reopening your practice. One is you need to stay connected with your team and your patients. If you haven't done that, if you've been on any of my webinars in the past 3.5 weeks, you will know that I have been touting this since day one. I think it's critical that you meet with your teams, Zoom or GoToMeeting, and now is the time that you have available to start planning with your teams. What does the new world look like? What does the practice look like? And in staying connected, you need to be looking at your own OSHA and HIPAA guidelines. Are you current? Do you need to be making changes to those? If you have not had OSHA and HIPAA training in your practice and you're behind, even though it's regulated, you may not be current, you need to take this time now and get up to speed. The other thing that needs to be occurring when you open your practice is you need to be staggering your patients. That's a given. I think that's just good practice. Best practice standards right now, we don't have a list of, hey, here's what to do post-COVID-19 of best practice standards. We're smart enough. We have worked in the industry long enough. I've been in it 38 plus years to know that this just makes good, practical, logical sense. You do not want to book your patients on the hour, every hour, like you had in the past. So what does staggering patients look like? It looks like maybe you have a 9 o'clock patient coming in for hygiene, and the next patient coming in for hygiene might be 9:10. And that, assuming you're working out of 2 rooms, of course. Similarly, for doctor's schedule, the front desk, if I have administrators on the line here today, please be cognizant that if we put pressure on the schedule and not allow ample time for cleaning of those rooms, they're gonna cut corners. And that's not gonna serve anyone good, including the administrative people. So the other thing that needs to be talked about is explaining the safety policy to our patients. So letting those patients know that it's really important, Mrs. Jones, go ahead and get you scheduled. And I have scripting later on, but just in general, we're gonna get you scheduled. And please, if you've done any traveling or if you have any symptoms of a cough or a fever or a cold, we ask that you let us know as soon as possible. And the checking in process, that's going to look different. When the patient comes in, we don't want our reception room to be open for patients to sit in. The reception room is closed. The patients cannot be coming in with any other family members. If the people don't have an appointment, they're not allowed in the practice, period. Now, I'm saying it to you that way. Would you say it that way to a patient? Absolutely not. You would say, Mrs. Jones, in an effort to upstand by our OSHA and sterilization guidelines, we are asking that you have an appointment at 11 o'clock on Monday and that you come to the practice. You be prepared to be here about 5 to or 10 minutes to, stay in your car. We will call us that you've arrived, and then we will call you or text you to let you know ready for you to come in. We are absolutely staggering our patients. We don't want patients to be crossing through or by each other. So if you would please respect that, that would be great. We're looking out for our patients' safety. The other thing is you need to really, when that patient arrives at that front door, that you are taking temperatures, that you are really kind of having, I say, an ICC, infection control coordinator, greeting them to take them back immediately so that they're not even, if we can avoid them having to even check in at the desk, that we already know, they've texted us, they've called us, we know they're on their way. let's meet them, let's get them and put them right back in the room. So again, I mentioned about taking the temperatures, non-essential items in your practice. Right now, several of you have items all over the practice, brochures, models, samples of what ortho looks like, or a crown and bridge, or what have you, dentist models. You need to get those put away. You need to just pack them up nicely and put them in a safe spot. Just until we know a little bit more. Let's keep our clutter to a very, very minimum. Think of very, very simple, less is best. No clutter around at the front desk, no junk hanging out, like clean everything up. Which brings me to, deliveries. Even at your home, I'm sure you're practicing safe deliveries from Amazon or from your grocers or what have you. Same thing has to happen in the office. I've been in many offices. I see what happens when deliveries come in. They go in, they either put them in the kitchen or they put them in the lab area, they put them wherever, and those boxes sit there. And this can no longer happen. We have to, I'm not saying you should not practice, but you need to sanitize that box in the proper way before you unload it and get that unloaded as quickly as possible. In regards to containing all aerosol spray, I'm not going to get into that too much today, as I mentioned, because there are not clear guidelines on that yet. But I do know one thing, that we can control some of that with rubber dam usage. And in dentistry right now, if you're an endodontist on the line, that's your world, but most general dentists are not used to routinely using rubber dams. And yet rubber dams are a very good way of controlling some of that aerosol. So I think that would be important. In addition, now's a great time. You've got 2 to 4 weeks probably before open to do some spring cleaning and maintenance. Look at your equipment, look around your practice. I mean, at home, you do spring cleaning in the spring and the fall. Why not do it in your office? So if a wall has scuff marks on it and it's showing dirty, paint it. Now's the time to get your office looking super, super crisp, professional, clean, really, really nice and sanitized and thoroughly cleaned. What else does that mean? It means taking some good soap and water and washing down your chairs really good, every little area of them, really getting them clean. So the other things is, I think it's important for you to take some steps to better organize your practice overall. Unfortunately, and for those of you that are staff members on here, you may or may not have had conversations with your employer. You as the employer who is on here on this webinar may have not had heart-to-heart conversations with your employees, and you need to. Are you prepared to come back and work in a couple of weeks or a week to get all this training done? Are you prepared to work more hours than we typically have worked in the past? We never work Fridays. I may need to open Fridays. Are you prepared to do that? Are you going to be coming, you have a choice. If somebody says to you, doctor, I know you're reopening, but I don't feel comfortable coming back. I have a mom that has lupus, or a son or daughter, whatever, with an, what I'm trying to say is like a situation where you could, feel as if you're not willing to take that risk. That's your choice, obviously. No one's here to say you can't do that, but you need to let your employer know. And as the employer, you need to make decisions as to hiring of new team, which brings us to taking better steps to organize your practice. I know I've looked in your practices. Your labs are not perfect. Your storage areas are a mess. They're not labeled. They're not organized as cleanly as they should. And maybe for those of you that are on the line and saying, she doesn't know, she's never been to our office. You're right, I haven't. But many offices really, really, if they're being honest and truthful with themselves, they could take some better steps to organize and get your practices in better shape. Why is that important? Well, it's particularly important if we don't have our key people that we're used to having not be there. If they're not there and they have, not coming in and they're not going to come in and they're leaving, then doesn't it make more sense that by having things more organized, we're going to be in better space to treat our patients. And then obviously, catching up on your CE. So the next slide is really talking about like, what does that infection control coordinator look like? And also, what is the hierarchy of safety and health controls pertaining to what we're talking about today, which first and foremost is training and administration controls. So we need to make sure that from the clinical area to the administrative area, that we are practicing infection prevention. And there's tasks that you need to be doing in your practice that are going to help you to do that. But we know that there is plenty of offices that have cross-contamination. What is cross-contamination? Well, we're going to go through that today in detail. The other thing that is part of this hierarchy of safety is engineering controls. How are we doing with the equipment that we have? And then work practice controls, and finally the PPE, the personal protective equipment. So in regards to an infection control coordinator, does it mean you should go out and hire this person right off the bat? Absolutely not. Right now, we don't even have a handle as to, latest things that I'm pretty much getting my head wrapped around is you're probably going to see a 50 to 70% diminish in your productivity right off the bat. It will ramp up, it will come back, be hopeful. It's not a doom and gloom situation, but I'm not suggesting that you go out and immediately hire an ICC person. But this can be an existing person within your staff, ideally, likely your lead dental assistant or RDA. And that person, that person's job would be to review and maintain existing policies and procedures within infection control, identify any gaps within your practice, maintain proper documentation and, renewal information that we need to do, provide training and education for anything that's new and ongoing, monitor compliance observation, and then ensure that equipment and supplies are, we're making sure that we're preventing any possible situations with that, and then maintaining open and unbiased communication with all the staff. So is this something, again, that you need to go out and hire immediately? No, but could this role be used by, if you are a practice that has a sterilization person, guess what? Her new title and her new role is infection coordinator, infection control coordinator. And so you absolutely can be doing things in your practice now without this role in place. It can be your existing employee. Will we modify that role? Yes. Then we look at standards. They used to be called universal precautions, and they're now referred to as standard precautions. And what are they? There's basically three. One is, assumes that blood and bodily fluid of any patient could be infectious. My recommendation is that you look at your patients as if everyone is COVID-19 positive, and recommend, there's certain PPE that, and other infection control practices to prevent the transmission in a healthcare setting. And then there's decisions that need to be made about and determined about what type of PPE and clinical interaction with the patient is going to occur. So let's go to the PPE, which we all know it's nothing new to anyone on the line, but I did want to include it. It's specialized clothing or environment equipment worn by an employee for protection against infectious materials. We all know, we see the image of what those look like. So let's talk about regulations and recommendations of some PPE. So OSHA issues workplace health and safety regulations regarding PPE that employers must, one, provide appropriate PPE for employees. That's, a big important thing. And why is that? Well, we obviously know that, we need to make sure that staff is not taking their gowns home. If you are using, and we'll get into a little bit of this later, but appropriate PPE should be that if we are going to use gowns and they are reusable and washable, that we should have those cleaned off-site and laundered and brought in. If you're using disposable ones, that's different. OSHA also specifies circumstances for which PPE is indicated. So if it's more, if it's a more complex procedure, then you might use a different type of gown than you would if it were a less invasive procedure. So let's take a look at the types of PPE used in the dental office. So currently, most offices, if not all, are using gowns, gloves, gowns, or aprons, masks, goggles, and face shields. Possibly in the future, it might look something like what you see on the right side of the screen, and that being that we may be using all disposable gowns, hair protection, shoe protection, N95 or N99 masks, and full leg protection. So keep in mind this, that while this may be the future, again, I don't have a crystal ball, you don't have a crystal ball, we can do the best we can do under the situation that we have right now. So if you think, hey, that is a great idea with the hair protection or the shoe protection, I want to do that, you may have difficulty finding that. I happened to go online the night before last, and I found some that were deliverable just from a Google search. But again, you have to feel comfortable. You have to do what's best for you and your team, and realize if you're a team member on the line that the doctor's vision may be ultimately to have all of those possible things in the future, but because of lack of availability, we just can't get it. So realize that, firm in principle, flexible in procedure. Firm in principle is, heck yes, we want all that. Flexible in procedure is, yes, we do, but unfortunately right now, we're not able to get our hands on it anywhere. So then we look at factors that are influencing the PPE selection. So what influences what you're gonna put on? One is the type of exposure anticipated. Is it a splash spray versus a touch? What's the category of isolation precautions? Which kind of leads right into the, durability and appropriateness of the task. So depending, again, what we are using it for, what procedure we're going to be using it for would dictate what type of PPE selection we would choose. And lastly, the fit. And I know most of you have experienced going into a practice or seeing your colleagues who have very ill-fitting garments on, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the first thing is gloves. The purpose, obviously, we all know, is for patient care and environmental services. Used when touching blood, body fluids, secretions, excretions, contaminated items, for touching mucous membranes or non-intact skin. So what is the material of gloves? It's anywhere from vinyl to latex to nitrile or other. They're either sterile or non-sterile, they're single use or reusable use. The reality is that many offices have kind of gone away from a latex type glove just because of the allergies that people have. But making sure that your hands are comfortable with the gloves is most important, and that they shouldn't be too loose or too tight. If they are too loose or too tight, you're going to feel that, you're more apt to have a tear, more apt to have, microorganisms come into those areas and get infected. So utility gloves are a vital part that are very underutilized in a dental practice. We know that we should be using utility gloves, but we're not always using utility gloves. And the CDC recommends that we use a puncture and chemical resistant utility glove when dealing with cleaning instruments and housekeeping and chemicals. So if you do not have utility gloves, I would urge you to get them. Make sure they are resistant to punctures and tears and chemicals. And then also incorporate using them. I've gone into many practices and seen people, having their gloves that they just got out of a room with, going to the sterilization cleaning area and cross-contaminating and not putting on utility gloves and really not the right thing. So you're going to learn a lot today. I hope that you can go back and apply. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts when you're using gloves. First is, gloves protect you against infectious, materials. We know that. However, once a glove is contaminated, it can become, the means of spreading infection materials to yourself or other patients or other coworkers. So you always want to go from working from clean to dirty. That is what is recommended as the best practice standards. And you want to limit the opportunities for touch contamination. So protect yourself from, touching everything in the treatment room, especially, limiting how you're opening drawers and grabbing knobs and things like that. That's touch contamination. So if you're a dental assistant on the line, now is the time to say to yourself, how many times do I get out of my chair to go get something that we need for a procedure? If your answer is way too many times, if it's one time, it's too many. If it's one time you're leaving the room, that is too many. So you need to make sure and keep the world around you in that operatory, that 10 by 10, as clean and sterile as possible. Keep your gloved hands away from your face. That means no touching, and believe me, I know I've touched my face about 5 or 6 times since we've been on this call. But I'm in the safety of my home and I'm not around patients, so avoid touching or adjusting your PPE. We know, and we'll get in this in a little bit, why people do touch their PPE so much. Change your gloves after use on each patient. During patient use, if it's torn or if it's heavily soiled, even if it's during the same patient, go ahead and change it. And disregard appropriately in a receptacle. What are the don'ts? Obviously, you want to not have contaminated hands when you're touching anything, particularly your face. Do not use your cell phone. For those of you that are on the line that carry your cell phone, including doctors, in your lab coat pocket, I am begging you to please do not use your cell phone in the office unless you are on lunch break or a break. It should be mandatory by every employer to say absolutely no cell phone use, period. That cell phone is so contaminated, and aside from that, you should not be doing texts or emails or any of that during a workday when you are on the doctor's payroll. Touch environmental surfaces except as necessary during patient care. So if you can avoid touching things within that operatory, consciously make a decision. Do I really need to touch that? Or am I just grabbing at it? Be as prepared as possible. And wash or reuse disposable gloves, depending upon where you're at. Gowns or aprons. So the purpose we know of use of a gown is to protect the skin and clothing from debris, aerosols, fluids, and other materials. So it's used during procedures and patient care activities when contact with clothing is exposed to either blood or bodily fluids, secretions, or excretions. The material is natural or man-made. It's either reusable or disposable, and it's either resistant to fluid penetration or it's not. So when I was talking earlier about what you need to do in regards to your PPE and what to determine what you will wear, you may elect to wear an apron or a resistant to fluid penetration type of gown or apron if you are doing a procedure whereby you see that it warrants it. But that doesn't mean you would do it on every procedure. So what are the do's and don'ts of gowns? Have your gown be long enough to cover your knees. So you kind of can see the do's and the don'ts are below. Change your disposable gowns when appropriate. Don't wear any gowns or lab coats or aprons or in non-clinical areas such as lobbies or break rooms or restrooms. If you are in an office complex where you have to go to use another restroom, be mindful of that. And the way to kind of help in that process, if you're the owner on the phone, is to put hooks up, put some hooks in the operatories and in areas so that when staff are done with that patient, they can take those gowns or lab coats off or aprons off and hang them up until the next use. So we should not be going behind the desk with people at the clinical area, going to the administrative area with, potentially contaminated gowns on. Then let's talk about face protection. So when is it used? Obviously during patient care activities that generate, again, splashes or sprays of blood or bodily fluid excretions. Masks protect your nose and your mouth and should fully cover your nose and your mouth to prevent fluid penetration. Goggles, they should fit snugly over and around your eyes, and face shield protect your face, your nose, your mouth, and eyes, and should be covered over your forehead and extended below the chin and wrap around the side of your face. So here's some do's and don'ts on the face protection. Anti-fog feature kind of helps with clarity sometimes. Use a face shield in combination with a mask and goggles. So don't do what you see on the right side where no goggles, no mask, just the face shield. Do not pull your mask underneath your chin or have it like this. This does you no good if your mask is here and your nose is exposed. So please be mindful of those. Now we're going to talk about how to safely don, use, and doffing PPE. So first and foremost, in the sequence of donning, putting on your PPE, your gown goes on first, then your mask, then your goggles or face shield, then your gloves. Combination of those could affect your sequence, so be practical. So how do I don a gown or a lab coat? First of all, make sure that you have selected an appropriate size. So not all one size fits all, right? So we need to be very mindful of that. The opening is in the back and secured at the neck and waist. If a gown is too small, you can use two gowns. One gown would tie in the front and one would tie in the back. How do you don a mask? You place it over your nose and mouth and chin. You fit flexibly, so make sure that you're fitting it to your nose. It shouldn't just be on and not molded to your nose bridge area and your chin if applicable. Extend it around with the elastic and adjust it to fit. You'll see all the areas here where there's possible leakage because she has not gone around and properly fit that to her face. Then how do you don eye and face protection? Place goggles over your eyes and secure to the head using the earpiece or headband. Position face shield over face and secure on the brow with a headband. Adjust to comfortably fit. So easy enough, but we need to do it in a sequence and make sure that you're doing it properly. So how do you don gloves? Make sure hands are completely dry first. Don gloves last. Make sure you select the correct type and size. Insert hands into the gloves. Extend the gloves over your isolation gown cuffs. You're going to see in a picture coming up that doesn't always happen. So how do we safely doff PPE? Well, the first and foremost is we need to understand and be cognizant of contaminated and clean areas of our PPE. So typically the outside front of our PPE is the most contaminated area. And they are the ones that are exposed to more of the infectious organisms that may reside on the front of your PPE. The inside or the outside back ties on your head and the back of your head are the areas that are most likely to not have been in contact with your infectious organism. Now, what if you're touching yourself with infected gloves on your hair, on your back, on the back side of you? Well, now you've just contaminated the back side of yourself as well. So be mindful of that. Sequence of doffing or removing your PPE: gloves, face shield or goggles, gown, and mask. So at the doorway, before leaving the patient room or the sterilization, make sure that you begin this process. Ensure that there's hand hygiene facilities that are available at a point that is needed and close to you, a sink or alcohol-based hand rub. So very, very important. So the first thing how do you doff your gloves? Grasp the outside edge near the wrist and peel away from your hand, turning the glove inside out. Hold the opposite gloved hand, slide ungloved finger underneath the wrist and pull it through to grab both of them, creating a bag for both of your gloves, and then discard. That is the proper way. How to doff goggles or face shield. grasp your ear or headpieces with ungloved hands. Lift away from your face, place in designated receptacle for disposal. And then the gown. Doffing the gown is unfasten the ties, peel away from the neck and the shoulder, turn contaminated outside toward the inside, fold or roll it into a bundle, and then discard it. Again, I know that many of you probably are on the line and saying, this is rudimentary. This is, everyone knows this. This is elementary. The reality of it is that it is, but many of you have not practiced like this in a long time, if ever. You're not paying attention to how you are donning and doffing your equipment. So when you're taking off the mask, avoid touching the front of the mask. Untie the bottom and then the top. Remove from your face and discard. Hand hygiene, very, very important. Perform your hand hygiene immediately after removing your PPE. If hands become visibly contaminated during PPE removal, wash your hands and continue to remove your PPE. Wash hands with soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub for at least 20 seconds. Again, making sure that just to recap, that when your hands are visibly soiled, you're gonna wash them before you put on your gloves, after you remove your gloves, whenever your gloves are torn or punctured, before and after eating, and again, after using the bathroom, which is important. Okay, let's talk about environmental surfaces and sterilization. There are many disinfectants out there. I don't have stock in any one company, but I do know that many of you, for as long as you've been in dentistry, you kind of grab that, whatever it is, Optimum One or Cavicide, and you just are on autopilot. I've done this for years. This is the product I've used. I know how to use it. I just do it. I would urge you to please, excuse me 1 minute. Make sure you're reading the manufacturer's recommendations. Many of you for years and years and years have not been following the manufacturer's recommendations, which is why it's so important at this time. So the whole team needs to be aware, front desk as well, that if you are not cognizant of how you're scheduling the patients, you're going to cause the team to feel pressure in the back. They're going to skip these steps that are so critical for disinfecting. And so, if a patient is scheduled for an hour, it may mean that we need to leave a 10-minute break in between to get the room ready for the next patient, or a 5-minute break, or what have you. So be mindful of the process. And this is a whole staff being mindful of the process. So I know that like Optimum One is a 1 minute and you need to use utility gloves. Many of the others you do. I think Cavicide is a 3 minute, but again, you're supposed to be using utility gloves when you are cleaning things, the chairs and disinfecting the cabinets and the knobs and whatnot. So if you're using a spray with a one-step process, you spray, wipe, and wait. If it's a pre-moistened, disinfectant wipe, you wipe, discard, and wait. And so we all need to know, what is that wait time? So don't assume the front desk knows what the wait time is. She or he has never probably cleaned a room in the back, so how would they know? The other option is a two-step process, which when using disinfectant spray, it may be a spray, wipe, spray, wait. Or if it's a moistened towelette, it would be a wipe, discard, wipe, wait. So one thing we know for sure, in every one of the last stages is a wait. That means that if you are a practice that has never waited and you've taken a paper towel to dry it because you're really busy and patients are about to come in and you need to just get it dried off, it's not disinfected. You've ruined the process. So that's why I'm recommending the wait time in between patients. Give yourself the ample time to do what we need to do. What will happen is if we are not scheduling properly, it's going to put pressure on the clinical team. And what I fear will happen is that they will cut corners. And when they cut corners, that is harmful to all of us, everyone. So then we look, this is a continuation, at how we're, transporting our instruments, how we're packing our instruments, how we're doing our chemical indicators and our autoclaves, and what are we doing for sterilization. I've created an autoclave sterilizer log that is on my resource page of my website, and you can download that. I have a whole bunch of valuable information that I'll go over later of what's on that resource, and it's free at this, it's always free, but definitely at this time. So on the autoclaver, you're documenting the date, the time that you loaded it, and the initials of who loaded it, the date, the time that it was unloaded, and the initials of who unloaded it. I would ask you that when you're doing your training with your teams, that if you are bagging instruments, that do a little experiment. Put the bag with some water in the bag and seal it, and then take the bag, put some water in it, and seal it on the perforated area where it's supposed to be sealed, and turn the bags upside down and see where you're getting leakage. I guarantee you that if you're properly sealing those bags, you're getting no leakage, which means what? We are not getting the bacteria that needs to or will go in there if it's not properly sealed. In addition, when you're cleaning instruments, it's very, very important that they are cleaned properly. There's lots of different ways to clean the instruments. You can, the least, and the CDC does not recommend that you are scrubbing instruments, like what used to be a practice. So you're either using a washing machine for that, a washing type machine that will wash and dry the instrument before going in the sterilizer, or ultrasonic cleaning. So there's various different ways, but the most effective way is obviously having a machine that does it for you. But is that something that you have to go out and purchase? Absolutely not. Could it be on a wish list for someday? Sure, but I wouldn't recommend you go out and get it now. There's ways that you can handle this in your practice effectively and efficiently. So also when you're doing, chemical testing and your indicators for your chem testing, it's very important to be doing that on a regular basis and every load, so that we're seeing, are we having any difficulties? Again, that ICC person would be the kind of overseer of that. And then we look at equipment maintenance and upkeep. So I'm very, very grateful to the dental representatives out there that have sent right away. I was seeing a lot of people sending out, hey doctor, here's what you need to do to close down the office, make sure you do this and that. That is awesome. Some of you got that information, some of you did not, but regardless, it is a mandate that you do keep maintenance records and upkeep, and you do need to be making sure that we're recording how our equipment is and what is happening with our equipment, such as if the sterilizer goes down, if we were doing, spore testing and doing what we needed to do on a regular basis, a chemical indicator test, we would have known that immediately, and that may determine us to recall some of those instruments back to the sterilization area. So I love that that sterilization autoclave log. I think that's really an important aspect that can be used. Keep equipment in working order and ensure that the staff is trained on how to use the office equipment and that they follow the instructions for use, the IFUs, and adhere to the safety requirements. The other thing is the SDS, the safety data sheets that come with your materials and your maintenance. You need to make sure that you put those in a binder and they're available to all the staff, and that you update those continually to stay current. I've also included on my resource page a list of maintenance items that need to be maintained and checklists for when and how often and whatnot. So I would encourage you to go there and grab that. That's a great thing if you don't have it already. It's something that I would encourage you to do. We do need to be maintaining these pieces of equipment properly. I'm sure that any of the manufacturer representatives will happily help you with that, or your dental supply manufacturers will happily help you with any information that you need and maybe don't have at hand. Then we're looking at this was so interesting to me. In doing the research, Elizabeth and I had discovered that the CDC had last updated their guidelines in 2003, which I was flabbergasted. They did do a slight update to certain areas of it in 2016 for the infection prevention practices in a dental setting. So that just blew me away. I don't know if you are as shocked as I was, but I was absolutely floored by that. In addition, the CDC does have a dental check mobile app that's awesome. But I do want to go over with you, for those of you that are Jean St. Louis consulting clients on the line, you will be able to customize your infection prevention checklist. But I want to show you this. Let me just go ahead and open that up. Bear with me for a minute. Hang tight. I'm just going to open up a document that will you'll be able to view. So bear with me.
Jean, you're doing great. I love it.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
I'm just filling the space right here while you bring that up. A lot of good questions in the Q&A. Keep loading this up. We have about 20 in there to answer. There's a bunch of questions in the chat box as well. Please start putting in the Q&A instead of the chat, and then Spencer's going to pull some of those Q&A questions and ask those for us towards the end. So, Jean, whenever you're ready for the Q&A, let me know. But I'm going to go back onto mute.
Just want to make sure that I have this where I'm sharing the right screen now. So bear with me. It's coming right up. All right.
That's okay.
Is everyone
go ahead, please.
Seeing it okay? Yes? Perfect. So, Jonathan, you can see everything okay? Shake your head.
I can, yes. Sorry.
Oh,
I was on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is a checklist that I'm going to provide for everyone that's on the call today. And again, if you're a client, we'll give you the customizable one. But this is put out by the CDC. This is a letter that I've created for your patients, and it's a part of this packet. Valued patients, we are resuming our care for our patients and are proud to inform you of the precautions we are taking to assure your safety. We have always followed the CDC OSHA guidelines in the prevention of cross-contamination. Additionally, we have altered our schedules to space our patients far enough apart so we will receive one patient at a time. Please know that the precautions we utilize every day to prevent the spread of infection in our practice also prevents the spread of COVID-19. To demonstrate our commitment to the health and safety of our patients and staff, we're sharing the Center of Disease Control's checklists and protocols enacted by our entire office. Our staff signatures at the end of this document show the entire team's dedication to your well-being. We look forward to your next visit. So this is 23 pages. Some of you right now are saying, there's no damn way I'm ever sending this to a patient, and that's your prerogative. You don't have to. I'm not here to say you absolutely have to. What I'm here to say is if I were a patient, I would feel so comforted by this checklist and knowing that you went through this with your team. So you're able to put your facility name, who it was completed by, and the date, and it breaks it down by administration measures of what needs to be done. So this goes into policies and practices, plethora. You save the form, you continue on. It's a fillable PDF. Goes into areas to be assessed for infection prevention and education and training, dental health and care personnel safety. It goes into that. The dental health care safety continued. And then program evaluation, and then hand hygiene and personal protective equipment, and then respiratory hygiene, cough etiquette, sharps and safety for sharps, safe injection practices, sterilization and infection of patient care and items and devices. And then it goes into environmental protection, infection prevention and control, and dental unit water quality. And then it goes into the direct observation of personnel and patient care practices. So again, similarly, you go through each of those areas. And last, get to the end where you then are able to have digitally signatures put in, as you see here. So I've created a drop down whereby you can put the title and or the full position, whichever you prefer. And then the person just basically types in their name and it appears as a signature and you put in the date. So I think, as always, I am committed to the health and wellness of our patients and staff. Again, totally up to you. I have no, I don't care if you use it or you don't use it. I would recommend, I think it's a great tool to have to ease the patient's minds. Our patients are more educated now than they have ever been in regards to infection and control and whatnot. So it's really, really important that you focus in on that and you do what you feel most comfortable with. Okay, so everything's okay on the screen, Jonathan?
Yeah, it looks great. Looks perfect.
I like when technology works in my favor. So here are some resources that I've used to gather some of this data. I've given you all the links to the infection control in dental health care, the immunization, the advisory committee on immunization practices, and then OSHA, bloodborne pathogens, and needle stick prevention. This is a script, a script. I have all the scripts. I've given you 2 or 3 samples on the resources page. Basically, hi, Catherine, this is Paige from Dr. Marshall's office. We are resuming our care for our patients, and I want to assure you our infection controls and sterilization protocols are guided by CDC and OSHA guidelines. First and foremost, Catherine, we are taking all precautions to protect each patient. Please know that the precautions we utilize every day to prevent the spread of infection in our practice also prevents the spread of COVID-19. Secondly, we've altered our schedule to space our patients far enough apart. May I email you our completed explanation of our infection controls? Confirm your email. Catherine, you were due for your hygiene visit last March 10th. We have an hour appointment with Julie available this Thursday at 2 or next Monday at 10, which would work for you. So you want to make sure that we're using this, the same scripts. We can't wing this, guys. You've got to get this script down. It's easy enough. It's not that hard. But it really, think about your patients as yourself. How comforted would you know that someone has gone to this measure? I can assure you, not every practice is going to be doing this. And so you want to be able to stand out up and above every other practice out there. So my resources here are at www.jeanstlouisconsulting.com/resources. There's a COVID-19 toolkit there that includes the guide sheet that I went over and the scripts and the autoclave checklist and a plethora of information. For those of you that are interested, I'm offering 5 complimentary COVID-19 recovery consultations through May 30th. You can email me at my email for that. And I will be going over how to mitigate financial impacts, how to repair your disrupted schedule, how to make sure that you're checking and doing things in the right manner, rebuilding your team, a plan to reinstate and restaff your team, and how to talk to nervous patients. So, all right, now we're at final thoughts. The final thoughts that I have about all of this after completing this and doing the research with Elizabeth's help has been, overall, the most important thing to remember about infection control in the dental office is that the best practices need to be followed without fail. Every patient, every time, every appointment. Both your health and the health of your patient are at stake. So you need to monitor compliance through checklists and interviews and observations. And I thank you for your participation today.
Jean, awesome. We have a lot of questions in the chat. In the chat as well as the Q&A. So I'm going to ask you a few in the Q&A. I want to give you a chance to catch your breath real quick because that was an awesome amount of information. And for those of you that are asking for the slides, Jean put up her contact information on the screen. I can also ask her to put it up again. Since we're going to go into Q&A, Jean, if you could just put a static screen of your contact information
Sure.
I'll just go ahead and do the Q&A and we can leave that up there. The first question, Jean, that we have is, how is the future looking for hygienists and the use of the Cavitron?
So I think for the immediate future, again, do I think that OSHA is going to have the one-all be-all answer when we open our doors? Absolutely not, nor will the ADA. My recommendation would be that you would not use Cavitrons initially when we open. Use hand scaling. If you have the staff availability to have an assistant in there suctioning with high-speed suction, you could do that, but I would just simply do hand scaling for now.
Okay. And then someone asked about a recording of this presentation. We're going to do it again on Thursday. Jean, I have bad news for you. I extended my license this morning, but I've gotten 100 emails from people saying they couldn't get in today. And it looks like we capped out at 500. So we're going to have a full house on Thursday as well. And if you're a doctor listening to this and you want to have your staff come and listen to this on Thursday, I'm going to send you an email link. You can email me and we can definitely invite them in to listen on Thursday.
Did you record this, Jonathan?
I do have recording, Jean, but I'm going to do it again Thursday just because the your audio is not perfect. I'm going to try and clean it up a little bit, but there's a little bit of reverberation. I've gotten a few comments on that. You sound perfect. We can hear you, but if I want to put it out there when I get a cleaner copy Thursday. As far as additional questions, for the handouts, okay. For the handouts, you can email Jean at the email address you see on your screen. What about those pediatric patients, the parents that want to hover around?
I think it's very appropriate to say in that line right now in pediatric dentistry, I would say we are asking that patients not be in the room with the patient and that they not be in the reception room and that you do not bring, because we know in pediatric practices, they typically will come in with their kids, not just one child. So if they are insistent, then I would say we will allow one parent only and no waiting in the reception room.
Definitely makes sense. I think they'd be understanding given the environment that we're going to enter into pretty quick here. And I'm going to ask, Spencer, if you could go ahead and look for a question in the chat, I'll let you cover those. I'm going to ask one, then you're up next. Do you have any distinct guidelines for orthodontic practices, especially with the everyday adjustments?
I don't have any specific guidelines. I would say follow most of the guidelines that were laid out here. I don't think that there's going to be any unique nuances in pertaining to ortho adjustments, changing of wires and things of that nature. I would follow the guidelines that I've laid out here and to the best of your ability until something perhaps comes out clearer.
Perfect. Spencer, you got a question for us?
Sure, I do. I've got a million questions, I suppose, all stacked up here coming out of the chat feature. Should we use a splash or the sneeze guard in the reception areas?
I do have some clients that are exploring the use of a resin type divider that is placed on the counter to protect the people at the front, and it has a cutout for, passing information back and forth. And I have a couple of doctors that I know that are actually looking into doing it across their whole front reception desk. They're in panels. They're about, don't quote me, but I think 12 to 1,500 per panel. They're kind of steep, I think, but it is protective and it makes sense. After all these years that we went away from get rid of the glass, get rid of the little window, it's so impersonal. Now we're going back to having to shield off the front again, but hopefully we'll see how long that lasts. I hope that answered your question.
I think
Possibly.
it does.
Another one?
So go ahead, Spencer. I'll do one. We've got a ton here.
If Hygiene is using their ultrasonic Cavitron, should they change after each patient?
Their PPE gown and their gloves, and yes, if they are doing it that way, for sure.
Jean, the question is, we work in a high-rise medical dental building. How do we stagger patients in a building with elevators? Should the patients be screened before they come into the building for temperature, et cetera?
I would absolutely have someone screening. You should talk to your management and see if they will provide someone to take temperatures. And what I know early on when this came out, I had a doctor's appointment and they screened me at the door and they put a sticker on my sleeve, and the green sticker meant that I was clear to go and I was able to take the elevator up. So I don't think that's an inappropriate action. I think you'll need to ask your management to provide you with that. The other thing is there are guidelines per city. I know the city of San Diego and the state of California has issued guidelines. And I also have a couple of those on the resource page as well. If you're from other states, I don't know what your state is mandating, but they're requesting notices and they are requesting that certain things be done in buildings. So I don't think it's inappropriate.
Okay, and then can we launder gowns on site if we have a washer and dryer in the office?
Again, no set guideline has come up, but I would say that that would be appropriate. One of the things that I did not mention, which I would urge you to do, and this has been talked about and should have been being done all along, you should not be wearing your shoes that you wore from home to the office back out of the office. You should be taking them off and leaving your shoes at the office, remain in the office. You come in, you take your shoes off, you put them in a grocery bag, and then before you leave, you put them back on. And the shoes that you wore with patients remain in the office. So.
Okay. Spencer, you have a question?
You may have covered it, but I'll ask another one. Is it, can you make recommendations on type of masks to use when? N95, L3, L2, L1, and a couple of other people have said, they can't get N95, so then what?
I think right now you're going to have to be using the masks that are available to you. We have seen people on the front line not having N95 masks, and those are ER docs and, nurses that are in the ER and they're using regular masks. So yes, until you get your hands on a N95 or 99 or any of the others, you're going to have to use what you have at hand.
And Jean, the question we have here is who should be taking temperatures, the front office or the back office? So can you take us through that patient intake protocol, whether it's a high-rise building or just a storefront, from the moment they arrive and get out of their car as far as taking the temperatures and screening them to bring them in the office?
So some of you are going to have a hard time getting thermometers to take temperatures, and hopefully you can. I would urge you to order it now because, they're going to be, if they're not used up or gone, they're going to take a few weeks to get them to you. So generally how I see it happening is the patient would pull up, they would be in their car, they would call the office and say, I'm here. They would know ahead of time that we do temperature screenings upon arrival. As soon as they arrive, we would let the back know your patient is here, and the clinical team would be taking the temperatures, not the administrative team.
Okay.
Unless the circumstances is such that you're very busy in the back, in which case if we have extra administrative people, it's not inappropriate to have them do it, but they need to know what they're doing and they need to record it. And I think at this point, everyone knows how to read a digital thermometer.
All right. And if our infection control coordinator has to take temperatures of patients at the door of the office, shouldn't they be wearing their gown when they do that? Is the question.
Yes and no. Yes, if that coordinator is going to be working with that patient, and yes, they should be protected. So yes.
Okay.
I want them going unprotected.
Two similar questions here. The first one is, how do you use a face shield with loops? And then many of us are using loops light combination instead of goggles. What shield is recommended for protection when using loops?
You know what? I have done some research and looked that up because that was something that kept me up one night in the process of doing this. How do doctors with loops have that face shield? I don't know of one. I've done quite a bit of research. I've not been able to find one that would accommodate that. I guess you could probably call your loops manufacturer and find out if they recommend one. I suspect something new is going to be coming out on the market within the next year or so to accommodate that. I haven't seen it personally.
All right, and then as far as masks, are N95 or KN95 masks required for all services, Are the masks required for all personnel at all times, including front office? And are you recommending N95 and KN95 be disposed of after each and every use?
Again, I'm leaving that to the doctor. There is no set recommendations out there right now. So it's not up to me to say this is what you need to do. I think if you can get N95 masks, that would be ideal to use those. So I don't have the answer on that, unfortunately.
And Jean,
guidelines.
sorry, I apologize. I think that some of this is a work in progress, and there's going to be new protocols that are handed down here in the near future. And I'll probably have you back on in about 2 weeks to discuss exactly what they're mandating we do in the offices. So I appreciate you're taking a shot at the answers, and everyone's well aware that a lot of this is still being disseminated at this time.
Sure.
Spencer, do you have any questions?
Sorry, you asked if I had any questions, Spencer?
Yeah, do you have questions in the chat? Do you have questions in the chat you can read off for us, or else I can just take them out of my
There's
chat
just
box?
so many in the Q&As that I was thinking that you were prompting and saying, let's move on to next week in the interest of everybody's time. Does that sound about right?
Okay. Yeah, we've got a few more minutes, so I'm going to cover mute. So we have 450 people still on the call. So, if you have something else scheduled, you can go ahead and take care of that. If you want to stay on for this Q&A, you can bear with us. I've got about 27 here in the Q&A box. I can't appreciate enough time that Dean's taking for us to answer these questions. And, especially just live questions. She has no idea what's coming. She can kind of read these with me, but
I'm fine with it.
okay. So let's spend another 10 minutes reading some of these questions. Do you have a tentative open date for California? Have you heard anything, or is it just speculation?
It's speculation. Something has been thrown around May 1st, May 15th. It's really speculation at this point.
And Jean, go ahead.
I do know that within this time frame, I would urge you, I can't even express it enough, to get your training going with your teams and get some of this stuff out of the way. Updating your health history form, updating all your HIPAA, update as much as you can and get it ready so you're ready to hit the ground running and you're not at square one.
And Jean, as you know, I am a practice broker who sells and transitions practices. And, what the buyers are going to be looking for is that the practice is continuing to be strong and going when we come back online. And the advice I'm giving dentists, and I want to hear your advice to agree or disagree with me, is to pick a date out there and start scheduling heavy, and then you can always backfill. For some, it's June 1st, so they can always fill in hygiene appointments in May if we open early. But make sure that the production is ready and it's going to be coming in. And obviously, utilizing some of these scripts that you've given us today is definitely going to help. But how do you feel about when they should start to schedule patients to be back in the office, given that we don't know when we're going to reopen?
I would definitely go by an opening date. I mean, right now, I would go under the assumption somewhere around May 1st to May 15th, somewhere in that range, versus June 1st. Now, as we all know, everything is changing daily, so everything of what I say could change in a nanosecond, based on what we see going on. But as we sit here today, I would say that would be a fair guideline for you.
Perfect. And does a beard affect the efficacy of the mask?
If you are, ideally, you should be properly fitted for an N95 and a zero pressure tank. That's not going to happen. That's unrealistic. But if you're feeling, or you can see, as in that one picture, that there were some gaps, then yes, it could affect it. It depends on the size of the beard, right? If the beard is a big old beard, it's going to definitely affect it. If it's more trimmed and close to your face, I would think it would affect it less.
Okay. And then a lot of offices have open entrances to the operatories. Do you recommend sealing off the entrances?
I did look into that. There are some corrugated doors that you put on that weren't horribly out of line. Right now, I would just say put it on hold, because there may be some stronger guidelines, and then you put that up and it's all for naught. You don't need it, or that you need to do something more elaborate. You need to do an air filtration system or something like that. So I just don't believe that the powers that be are going to have us open and have all the answers we need. I'll be shocked, especially when I looked at the CDC and saw they didn't update it since 2003.
In the case of minor patients, do the parent or guardian have to come in with the minor patient? So I think we kind of talked about in the pedo practice, but do they have to come in, or how do we mitigate not letting
I
them
think
in?
if the parent is with them and again, and they're insistent on being in there, then you're obviously going to have to make sure if they are coming in the room that they need to be gloved and masked, and we can't just have them come into that area with being unprotected. That discussion needs to be had ahead of time. If they are a parent, that's okay. Like, okay, Johnny, you're going to go in and I'm with you at the door while they take your temperature, and then I'm going to go back in my car and they're going to call me when you're done. Then mom will come in and pay the bill and Johnny will go out. Johnny will go out, mom will come in, however. So.
Definitely. A few have asked me about monitoring the attendance for CE credits. So I covered that in the chat. Doing this as a free seminar series, and I wish I could do CE, and I'm looking for a sponsor now. There is a company that will give you CE certificates for this at cost. Zoom monitors how long you're in the room for the to be eligible for those CE certificates. If that's something that interests you in getting CE, email me at jonathan@tbibroker. I put that into the chat, and most of you have that from my response. You mentioned that, sorry, Gene, here's a question. We'll do a couple more of these as we're wrapping up. We still got 420 people here. You mentioned that
Okay.
ER doctors and nurses don't have N95 masks. They are also at huge risk of becoming infected. It seems irresponsible to say that a dentist and office staff to use what is available when they are basically frontline working with aerosolizing and potentially infected saliva. Before the closure, my office could only order level 2. It seems we shouldn't open until proper, safe N95 are available, not wing it until then. So it's kind of a statement and a question, and you can comment on that.
My comment would be, whoever wrote that, you need to do what you are most comfortable doing. I'm not touting that you should go out and put yourself in jeopardy by no stretch of the imagination. You, again, need to do what you're most comfortable with. There are some doctors out there that have N95 masks right now. They were able to get, how they got them, I have no idea, but they have them. So I understand your concern, and you need to do what is best for you and your practice. So.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, unless something's mandated soon, it's going to be whatever you're comfortable with. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, and we know that, there are people on the front line that are using PPE that is not N95 that also haven't caught the disease. So there's the virus, there's so much out there that is we're still learning. And this is going to be a 2-year process or more of what we learned from this virus. It's not going to be all given in 1 month or 2 months.
And here's 2 questions that kind of correlate together. How do we get reimbursed for the extra cost involved with the updated infection control guidelines? And then someone else is saying, do you recommend a charge for infection control fee, and how much? My hygienists want extra time for their hygiene visits.
Okay, so that was an afterthought. And your hygienist is going to need extra time for the hygiene visits like we discussed, because we need to make sure we're changing, cleaning the room properly and changing the PPE and getting ready and spacing those patients out so that we're not having multiple patients in the reception room at the same time. In regards to charging for the PPE or infection control, I suppose you could bill it as a 9999 miscellaneous code right now. Your insurances probably aren't going to cover it. Again, this is something that may come out later, that insurances allow you to charge. If you, I would urge you to do your financial, do your math. What is it costing you per patient for a mask? The gown, if you're doing hair covering or foot coverings or gloves, do what it costs you, and then appropriately charge that if you feel you need to. I personally am recommending to my clients that they incorporate it into a fee. Now, the issue you're going to have is that, in other words, if you feel that the cost is $10 more per patient, then raise the appropriate services by $10 as an example. If, however, you're taking, if you're heavily PPO or Denical or something like that, you can't charge extra for that service anyway. So even if you had the fee, you wouldn't be able to charge extra, and you're not going to be able to increase your fee. So I think, again, this is an area that if I talk with you in a month, I may have a different opinion, because I may see, I have a mastermind group that we met starting the first week of this virus, and it is an HR attorney, an accountant, an insurance credentialing person, a dentist, a hygienist, and somebody else, agency, marketing agency, and all of those individuals have been meeting with me once a week. And the idea behind that mastermind group is to come up with possible solutions before you even know you need them, which is what I was hoping today was for you, and continues to be. That group continues to meet. So as we see things, and the insurance credentialing person is all over the insurance aspect of it, I will happily share that data with you as it becomes available.
And Gene, if they email you, are you disseminating any newsletters or updates weekly about what you're figuring out as far as what the protocol is going to be for these items?
Anything that I have, I will disseminate on my resources page, and you're absolutely welcome to email me at any time and ask me any questions about anything. I'll happily answer questions for anyone.
Okay. And it's because someone wrote here, what they've read lately is that they're supposed to change their gown or lab coat between every patient. And they said, this is from a hygienist. And then someone else said, do you dispose of your gown between or after every single patient? So you can answer that or say, we don't know how that's going to be mandated.
We don't know how that's going to be mandated yet. Part of the problem that we may run into is what? Lack of gowns. So to say, throw out every gown, well, we don't know that yet. If we can't get gowns to begin with, we're not going to be throwing out every gown. So, in the ideal world, yes, we would throw out the gown, throw out the mask, throw out the gloves, throw out everything. I would not be throwing out any foot gear or any leg. They have leg and kind of gear that you can put on. But again, this is going to be work in progress. I wish I had it for you all right now and say, this is the guideline, this is what you do. I have information that's at hand right now, so.
May I chime in here?
Absolutely.
A number of questions surrounding air purifier, HVAC, HEPA filters, etc.
Yep. So I thought I addressed this earlier, but just to be clear, I don't feel that it is appropriate for me to comment on that right now because we just simply don't know. I would be really just giving my opinion about, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? Well, my recommendation today, when the powers that be come out and give us guidelines in 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever, it may be totally different. So I would not want to advise you on, that type of prevention for your HVAC and for things of that nature with aerosols. I do know one thing, just from my clinical knowledge, I think logically it makes sense to use a rubber dam. That's just me being a dental assistant who thinks, God, well, that's one way to control aerosols. Why don't we do that? Is that the only thing we can do? Sure, it's not. There's definitely more. But what are those mores? I'm skeptical to say. I just don't know. I don't feel it's fair.
Perfect, Jane. And someone was nice enough to put the link to your Facebook group into the chat, and it's towards the end here. So if anyone wants to join Jane's Facebook group to communicate with her, which I definitely and highly suggest, that link has been put into the chat there. You can find that information. Gene, an interesting question here. Should we be checking the temperatures of the staff each day and have them complete screening checklists from there okay to work?
Absolutely, we should. Without a doubt. Without a doubt, every day. Yep, start of the day, you get your temperature taken. Yep. Morning temperature check.
And is there a possibility that we can administer a swab test or any test to check whether a patient is infected or not, and perhaps bill that procedure to the insurance companies? Or do we require patients if they have been tested negative for COVID-19?
Great question. I mean, I have been, my husband has watched me kind of scream at the TV when they're talking about saliva testing, and not once do they mention that, hey, maybe dental offices would be doing this. Like, that to me is like a natural thing. Like, yeah, we would be the profession that would do that. Yet, if you've been on any of my other webinars, I put up a slide that says, let the ADA hear your voice. Like, let the CDA hear your voice. Get out there on social media and start asking, the people that are representing you, the going to Washington, emailing, saying things to them about you're a dental practice and you should be the ones that have the capability and the knowledge to be able to do some of these testings, whether it be saliva or antibody testing. So great question. I don't have the answer for that, but I am in full support of dental practices to do that. And of course there would be a billing on that. I know that even in my own physician's practice, they've been doing telemedicine now for about 2 years. And they sent me a notice 2 weeks ago that said, we have the antibody testing going on, and we'll bill your insurance, but you're still gonna have to pay $150 for that visit. I booked an appointment, found out that they weren't using FDA approved. I opted out of that appointment. But yes, I suspect that in time, we're gonna have options for many things.
Perfect. And Jean, we've got about 1:23 or about 23 minutes over, but we still have close to 400 people here in the room. So we're going to do about 2 or 3 more questions, and then we can keep going a little bit. We will replay. Jean's been nice enough to come back on Thursday again at 2 p.m. Pacific time and do this again. So if your staff missed this, you think it's something they should hear, or if you have a friend or another doctor you think should hear or see this information, please have them come back in on Thursday. I'm going to do a recording to be disseminated after Thursday. So I don't know when that'll be. Jean's audio is pretty good, but I want to get it a little bit clearer for the recording. Can we get Jonathan's email for the CE units? Yes, we're working on the CE units. My email is jonathan at TDI, the letter T, the letter D, the letter I, broker.com. I'll go ahead and send an email out about the CE. There's a third-party company I'm going to connect you with that's been nice enough to do the CE for us. As far as a copy of the slideshow, you can email Jean at jeanstlouisconsulting.com. It's actually gstlconsulting.com. And the reason I spell a lot of this out is some of you aren't going to be able to see the slides on the screen. You're going to hear just an audio version of this at a later time. Jean, what about...
Somebody was asking about the Facebook. Here's the Facebook link. Can you see it on my screen?
Not yet. There's a little bit of a delay, so maybe it's popping up.
It's in the chat. I just opened the chat up larger. It is.
Oh, okay.
You that are online. It is facebook.com/groups Jean St. Louis Consulting. There's http // facebook.com/groups Jean St. Louis Consulting. So you should be getting it through there, and I'll answer any questions through there or anywhere. So.
Perfect. My email address again, and some people ask, JONATHAN at TDIBROKER.com. A couple last questions here, Jean. Someone asked about using a level 1 or 2 mask over the N95 so that the N95 can be reused.
I think that would be appropriate. Absolutely.
It's an interesting one. And then what about air purifiers in the operatories? Do you think that's really going to help, or that psychologically will help, or what are your thoughts on air purifiers in all the operatories?
I think, again, that kind of is the whole basis of the aerosols. Like, would the air purifier take that out? Does it make sense? I don't think it would hurt by no stretch of the imagination. But again, I would hate to say something and then it change in a couple of weeks, and then someone went out and bought a $1,800 air purifier and says, geez, I should have never done that. Why'd that girl tell me? So yes, I do believe that you can, and it probably isn't a bad idea.
Okay, yeah, and I appreciate not sparking people to go out and spend a lot of money on something that might not be as useful, but it couldn't hurt at this point.
in doing my research on the air purifiers, the common thing that I kept hearing was that they are, their decibels in regards to the noise is about 50 and humans speak at about 60. So it is somewhat loud. And what happens is people in the operatory turn it down, and then you're defeating the purpose of purifying the air. So you're causing it to be not as effective. So I would just, caution you that way, that if you do get one, make sure it's on full speed and, at the level it needs to be.
All right. And then the question is, do you know if the new masks and PPE that we recently import into our country are safe and free from contamination, as they are mass produced from China with or without the quality control from the FDA?
Do I know, or do I think?
Yeah, I mean, does the virus,
I mean,
become less?
your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. Unfortunately, a lot of our materials, as we've learned throughout this pandemic, have come from China. And so, we're gonna, I think as a country, we'll probably be changing some of that, and maybe we can start producing more things here. I would look online, I would Google, and I would look online like American made masks and see what comes up. I know I watched something, it was a couple of weeks ago, a couple out of Ohio, and he was a microbiologist, I believe, and his wife was a nurse, and they were talking about sterilizing of masks, and they, within like 2 days, figured out how to sterilize 400 or 700 masks at a crack on N95s. It was amazing. But there's our sources out there in America. At this point, I would say try to find what you can, follow the sanitizing, recommendations that have been put out by, Dr. Fauci and his group. So.
Okay. Perfect. And I definitely want to have you back in a couple weeks as more of this becomes, not that you're theorizing, and I appreciate your opinion. I'm glad that anyone that steps up during this environment and gives their opinion is doing the research that you are putting in the time for this. But as things are disseminated, the protocols that we need to put in place, I definitely want to invite you back to talk some more about this. A couple more questions and we can wrap it up.
Sure.
I have a hygienist work. Can I have a hygienist work out of 2 chairs instead of waiting 10 minutes? That would put the wait time for each chair for an hour. So I think that's a pretty straightforward yes, that each chair would be stagnant for an hour if they're using 2 chairs.
And it is yes. And keep in mind that while I said 10 minutes, if your disinfectant is 1 minute and you don't need a utility glove like one of the ones that was on there, then you have to change it a little, but not much. So yes, of course, if you can have her work out of 2 rooms, awesome. If you're going to do a super hygiene day and that would be where you open up every operatory to hygiene patients, and doctor has no patients doing dentistry to get caught up, you may have temporary hygienists in, and you would basically stagger their start times. So every patient would be off. That's why I said, one of the things that you need to be mindful about is staff needs to know, are they willing to work and change their hours to keep their job? Excuse me.
Thank you. Gene, that's a dry cough. That might be.
Yeah, Gene, are you okay?
Fine. I've been on webinars all morning, so
I know.
This one, so it's all good. It's all good. I'm glad to be able to help people out. It's what the reason I got into dentistry. So
a couple more questions and we're going to wrap it up. Somebody asked, can we get an invite to Thursday's meeting? Yeah, we'll have Gene back on Thursday, and I'll send an email out, and definitely invite your staff to attend that meeting, or other dentists you think will want this information. Gene, since ortho has no aerosol, then can we use 1 gown for the entire day? And then tell me about the perception, Gene, this is my question, of sterile versus non-sterile, and the patient's perception of what we might be doing, and help to alleviate their concerns as well if they see us in the same gown all day.
if they see what, Jonathan?
So the question is, since there's no aerosol in ortho, can we use the same gown for the entire day? So that was the question. Then my question would be, are there things that we're doing too to help alleviate the perception of the patient that maybe we're being less sterile or more sterile than an office? By changing the gown, are we sending a good message, or do we have to do that? Or what should we convey in conjunction with wearing the same gown all day, that we are exercising every measure we can to.
Well, I think when you go through the checklist from the CDC, you're going to see that, yes, that is an important thing, and that you do need to change the gown. In ortho, you're right. You're not dealing with aerosol sprays, but, I think Jonathan's right. Perception is everything. People are going to perceive what you're doing. Again, we may be opening, and these resources may not be available to us. So they're going to say, yes, open, but we're going to be with the current slide. Remember how I had the current slide and the future slide? The current things that we have may still remain. Like, we don't know if we're going to be able to get some of the future things yet. So we have to be, mindful of that. And I think, realize that a dentist necessarily, oh my gosh, my dentist is being cheap, he's not willing to get it. It may be that he can't find it or she can't find it. She would get it if she could get it, but the resource isn't available. So be mindful of that.
All right, and I appreciate it, Jean. And 2 questions about the UV light. Is UV light helpful to as well in antibacterial, antiviral sanitizing?
I don't have enough intel on that myself, but I can't answer that, really.
Okay.
I'm not going to BS you, but I can't answer it.
I appreciate your honesty, and I know you put thousands of hours into research, or a lot of time into researching this. So I appreciate that. And maybe it's something you can add to your checklist as your mastermind group meets, or some of the research that you're doing.
Yeah.
One comment, Jonathan, you host the best webinars. I'm brand new at this. I can't appreciate the comment enough. I'm smiling and giggling here because this is something I just started a couple weeks ago. So thank you, Catherine. 2 more questions and we're going to wrap it up, Jean. What do you think about having the hygienist doing prophy, x-rays, taking intraoral pictures, and no exam the same day? Then the dentist will review the x-rays and intraoral picture and do the exam over the phone or FaceTime.
That's teledentistry or virtual dentistry, and that's not, that's a great, I've been promoting that since this whole thing came out. I don't believe that ethically you can do the prophy, the bite wings, and whatnot without doing an exam. In other words, you have to do a periodic exam in order to kind of perform your prophylaxis. So I would say, great idea. I love the way that you're thinking out of the box, whoever said that. I think that's an awesome way that you're thinking, and whoever's got you on their team is lucky. But I think that in all honesty, you want to be able to do that exam. We have to be mindful that while we want to get as many hygiene patients in a timely fashion, because that will help fill up the doctor's schedule. We know that when we have a good hygiene schedule, we typically the next month will see the doctor's schedule is very good and productive. We have to do that in a very controlled setting now. So good question though.
Perfect. And those of you on the call, there's still 300 people here. There is tomorrow at 11 a conference call just like this, a webinar on teledentistry. It's a doctor in Las Vegas who utilizes teledentistry. It's not a sales pitch. He's going to give us a great explanation. He's an excellent communicator. He's done a lot of research on this, so I'd invite you guys all to partake in that call tomorrow if you have a chance. 2 more questions, Jean, and then I promise we're going to wrap it up. I wear prescription glasses. Are they adequate under the face shield, or will I also need goggles?
I think they're adequate under the face shield. However, they, depending upon, you've got gap under your eyewear here, right? So that could be a problem with the sealing, where a goggle will be more seal. I would try it over your glasses and see if it works. The one thing that we know is that if we have ill-fitting PPE, we're less apt to, use it, or we're going to be, this doesn't fit right, or this doesn't fit right. And so we're messing with it more, and we're touching it more, and we're adjusting it more. And so you have to kind of have things that fit right. That kind of leads to the question that was asked earlier about the doctors and hygienists that do lubes, and how would you wear a face shield with them? I haven't seen any that are, you know, constructed that way. That would be perfect for that. So
Jean, I think that that's going to wrap it up for the questions we have now. I appreciate all the time that you've given us, and I definitely appreciate on behalf of all the people here, say a big thank you for coming on and having you back on Thursday. I don't want to miss out on giving a shout out and a thank you to Spencer Wesley with Engage Advisors. If you guys haven't talked or working with Spencer, contact me. I can connect you with him. Spencer's a great guy. Definitely someone that should be on your team to take counsel with. Jean, geez, thank you. You're breaking the internet with all the people that want to get on here. I'm going to give you the last 20 seconds to say goodbye and give them some follow-up advice to get a hold of you.
yeah, well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for hosting these. They are great, and you know, I have been in dentistry for a long time, and I do feel very connected to what you are all going through right now, and I'm here to help. So, you know, I have a plethora of services that I can offer and help dentists with, and would love to, you know, talk with you. If you want to talk, that's fine. But follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram. You know, let's just continue to connect and know that I'm here for you if you need me. And if you need more help than what we're seeing on the webinars, I'm here for that as well. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And if you guys want Jean's cell number, I text her with questions all the time. I'll give that. No, I'm kidding. Jean, thank you so much. You have so many mediums to get a hold of you. You are a wealth of information and absolutely one of the best in the business. I cannot appreciate and thank you enough for your time. I said I'd give you the last 20 seconds, but I can't let you walk away without, again, reiterating how much we appreciate you coming on today and working with us. So with that, we're going to go ahead. You're welcome. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the call. Thanks everyone that's here. Thanks for attending. And then again, we'll see you guys all Thursday. There's a note that says Facebook link again. I'll send it to you, but Jean, go ahead.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Yep, please be safe. Enjoy this time with your families. Let's get some stuff done during this crisis. We're going to get through it together. And with that, I'm going to bid you guys all farewell. Thank you again for coming.
Bye-bye.